Sky. Oh, we're starting. There we go. We're going there. Hi, everyone. I'm meteorologist Royal Norman. This is Sonoran Sky live, brought to you by the First Alert Weather Team at Arizona Family. We've got a great topic today and a great guest. Tom Bushotsky is here. He's the director of water resources for Arizona. And really, you've spent a career sort of minding water in the state of Arizona. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, February will be 43 years.
That's amazing.
44 years in the state of Arizona. And interestingly, I started out as an intern in the department I now run. Spent a few years there and almost 24 years in the city of Phoenix, and now 15 years again back with the state.
Oh man, that's pretty cool.
It's been a great career.
So we're going to talk today about the new active management areas. I always want to call them districts. That's out in La Paz County, essentially that area for groundwater. That'll sort of be the first half of our chat today. And then after that, some developments on the Colorado River. Perhaps, we don't know, but we've got to talk about that because we got to get a deal on the Colorado River, don't we?
That is right.
Yeah. So first of all, let's talk about the. You call them active management areas, right?
Correct.
And you put in a new one in, I want to say basically La Paz County, western Arizona. What does that do?
So, first of all, the active management area idea was created in 1980, same time my department was created. And it really is a recognition that in these areas, the water under the ground, groundwater, is being used at a rate faster than Mother Nature or other methods replenish or replace that water. So eventually you would mine all that water away and it would dry up the underground supply. But you also have water quality issues and other issues that are created by excessive pumping of groundwater without it being replenished. So what these areas do allows me, the director, to put in management plans that are designed to reduce those groundwater withdrawals through various methods, increasing the efficiencies of various uses like agriculture. But every water user is regulated: municipal use, agricultural use, industrial use. Different methods to get them to reduce their water use, different goals in terms of how much you reduce over some period of time. These active management periods are forever, but you try to put together discrete plans, 10 years, 5 years, depending on the time frame, to have goals. You meet your goals, and then you readjust. You look at the physical conditions, you look at who's out there using the water, and you adjust to the conditions that you're facing.
Now, people may not know this, but Phoenix metropolitan area is in an active water management area, and most of the urban areas are. I once asked you, why don't we just put the whole state under it? And you said, there's different questions in different areas of the states and different problems and different availabilities of surface water. And I was like, okay, I get that. Why the 8th one now over in La Paz County? Why did we decide to do that?
So, Governor Hobbs created a water policy council. We addressed water issues in that council. My department mined data and showed the council that there were 3 priority areas where the decline of the groundwater table, the decline of the amount of water under the ground, was at a fast pace, something that was unsustainable. And that subsidence, which is the shrinking of the underground soil structure, which can cause cracks on the surface of the earth that might go right through the middle of your house or through the middle of a road, that was an area that was a priority area for those things to occur, the subsidence, the ground shrinking, and for the water being mined away. So we created one in the Wilcox area in southeast Arizona, and then we moved on to this next area, the Renegris Plain Basin in western Arizona. Most of that area, the issue is caused by agricultural pumping. And so we figured it was time to move forward. It also, honestly, is because Governor Hobbs had an initiative to do a more progressive set of laws that would allow for management in these areas, rather than the 1980 style active management areas like Phoenix that you mentioned, right? We couldn't get that through the legislature. But Governor promised the folks out there who are concerned about either their livelihood or their retirement home or their investment in their home
Right.
going away over time. And so this is a tool available to the executive branch. I'm the one who makes the decision. Obviously, I work for the governor.
Yeah.
I support her policy perspectives and initiatives. So it was time to do that. We still hope that we can get a more flexible, broader framework for the rest of rural Arizona.
Yeah.
Not sure where that's going to go this session in the legislature.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of politics involved with water, as we're going to hear with the Colorado River too, as well. But okay, so we heard a lot of stories the last couple of years about rural residents, and their wells were running dry because the aquifer was dropping below their wells, and they couldn't afford to go deeper. Is this essentially meant to hold the aquifer at one level, or just drain it more slowly?
So it depends on the management goal, but we're trying to, in the Wilcox area, cut the use to the point where you're getting closer to holding that level steady. In the new area, Renegris and in Wilcox, they have no surface water supplies. They have no Salt River project.
Right.
They have no Central Arizona project. So all they have is groundwater. So you can imagine if you go right to an outcome in which you hold the level of the underground water steady, you're going to have to shut down just about every use except maybe the homeowners, right?
Yeah.
They need an economic base.
Right.
People need jobs.
Right.
It's a balancing act for water management to look at the various uses that take advantage of this groundwater, and to balance the economy, the lifestyle, the value for the homeowners, what people see as the environmental values, all these things that you try to balance out, and it's a juggling act.
Yeah, and it's a huge balance. It's not just as easy as one person's water is gone and another person's maybe pumping a lot of water. It's the whole area's lifeblood, if you will.
Correct, and it's a common resource. And so if I'm 10 miles away from you and I pump a lot of water, it's going to impact you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's not like geography saves you. Like,
Yeah.
this is why the geographic area of the active management area is one groundwater basin, right? In that basin, everyone pumps from the same source, even if you're not directly next to each other.
Okay, before the active management area was in, if I say I moved out there before that and I dug a drill, drilled a hole, got some water, could I have gone as deep as I wanted and pumped as much water as I wanted, just using my cost like electricity to pump it out?
So you could go as deep as you want, and you could pump as much water as you want, as long as you put it to what's called a beneficial use.
Ah, okay.
So using it in your home is a beneficial
Yes.
use. Growing a crop's a beneficial use.
Yes.
Could you pump it and just dump it on the desert?
No.
You could not do that.
No.
That is not a beneficial use. But
Okay.
that is the one kind of restriction that's out there. But you could pump enough water that the person next to you, their well could go dry because
Right.
the water level falls below, and you mentioned that in
Right.
the lead-in.
Right. So, okay, so now I move out there, I buy a plot of land, I drill a well. What are are there regulations now that I have to follow?
So now, yes. So your use would be given efficiency or conservation requirements. Agriculture, you would have a maximum amount of water you could pump. As one method of controlling their pumping, you would not be able to exceed that. Industrial uses might have that. They might have a reuse requirement. So if you're a cooling tower, you might have to reuse the water 15 times instead of 10, things like that. All with the goal of increasing efficiency and decreasing the amount of water that comes out in total in that active management area. So you're starting to get a handle on the overpumping. You can look at it like mining. When you overpump groundwater, it's just like mining ore. Once you get rid of the ore, there's no more ore,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So we use that term groundwater mining, and that's a negative term because you're taking away a resource that's not being replaced.
Yeah, but it kind of says what it is. So now going backward, for people that have wells out there, farms and whatnot, and businesses, are they under any new requirements now? Although their wells have already been there and they've been pumping for years. Do they have new requirements?
So yes, those people that are already there will have new requirements. One is you can't put in new agriculture. So the number of acres that's there in the 5 years prior to the creation of the active management area, that's the legal standard. That's the cap, right?
Yeah.
So that is something that's different. There's also different, like well spacing requirements. If you want to put in a new well and you're within a certain distance of me, we have to look at the impact you're going to create. And if you create an impact greater than X and Y, then we would not let you put in the well. Right now, in those areas without regulation, you come to us and you get a permit to drill a well. And as long as you construct the well so as not to pollute the aquifer, right, not to harm the aquifer physically from a water quality standpoint, we have to issue you a permit to drill that well, regardless of how big the well, how much you pump, or anything else. There's no analysis of how that new well is going to impact either the aquifer or their neighbors. So those are some examples of how new regulations, or this creation of the area, is going to create some new regulations for the people that are there.
And I was asking you before we got started, my confusion, and I admit it's mine, about groundwater. Sometimes people say it's a finite resource. Once it's gone, it's gone. But then we hear about recharging the groundwater, the aquifer, at times. We hear a lot from, along the SRP rivers and whatnot. So what am I missing there? Is it a finite resource, or is it a slowly kind of recharging thing?
So what you're missing is that in just about all places, the amount of water being taken out is greater than the amount of water being put back in by this recharge. Whether that's recharged by rain, or what we've done for a long time is take Central Arizona project water we don't need for everyday use and put it under the ground for a dry day, not a rainy day, right? So that's artificial recharge. When it rains, it's natural recharge. Pretty much everywhere we're taking out more water than we're putting back in through any recharge method. And whether that's at a slow pace or a fast pace, math will tell you one thing: sooner or later, there's not going to be any water left.
And do we have any idea how much water, or estimates how much groundwater is still under Arizona and usable? I understand it's a fair amount.
We do. We have estimates, but they are estimates. There's various industry standard acceptable techniques to figure that out. But what's difficult, and what my techie people always tell me is, Tom, you can't take out of the ground everything that's under the ground, right?
Yeah.
Because of physics.
Yes.
The water molecules stick together, the water molecules stick to the soil particles. You can only get so much water out. And once you take the water out, the ground tends to compact or shrink.
Right.
So you can never put as much back in as was there before. And it depends on the type of material under the ground, the type of soil, the type of rock, right? But yeah, it is, you can't say, okay, we have X amount and let's just pump it to an extinction. The more you pump, the worse the water quality gets.
Yeah.
So your treatment costs go up. If you're taking it out of a well and drinking it, you're not served by a city, then you start to have cost issues there. This ground shrinking, it's kind of like a sponge. When a sponge is wet, it's bigger. When it dries out, it shrinks. The difference between underground, a sponge will get bigger again when you fill it up with water. The ground won't.
Yeah.
Right?
So the analogy is, it's not like your local gas station where a tanker pulls up and fills up the tank and it comes to the top. It's nothing like that at all.
It's not a bathtub.
Yeah, it's not a bathtub. Yeah, there you go. Are you looking at any other areas? I know that we've done some stories on the San Pedro down in southern Arizona. And if you can't say, that's fine. But are you looking at other areas to put these management areas in effect?
So we will continue to monitor the conditions in all of these basins. I think there's 52 basins.
Yes.
10 or so already have some kind of regulation, right? We'll continue to monitor that and make those decisions when the time comes.
Yeah, okay.
It is a heavy lift from a staffing level to first do the analysis to create these things. There's a big statutory process, but then we have to implement the new active management areas. People with irrigation come to us and file an application to get a water right, and we have to assess the history and the use and all these things. So, it takes quite a bit of staff, and my staff are being spread thin with this latest. But as I said, it is a huge priority for Governor Hobbs to afford people in rural Arizona protections, because the 1980 Groundwater Code that created 5 initial areas in the populous areas of the state, think Nogales, Arizona,
Yeah.
all the way through Phoenix,
Right.
and then circular around Prescott. Those people are having their futures pumped away, their kids, their grandkids.
Yeah.
And we will either move forward with new legislation, or we'll continue to use the tools that are available under the current law, which I use to create this new active management area.
We're talking with Tom Bushotsky, who's the Arizona Director of Water Resources. We're going to switch to the Colorado River, another important story after a short break. Welcome back to Sonoran Sky Live, a service of First Alert Weather and Arizona's Family. We're talking with Tom Bushotsky, who's the Director of Water Resources for the state of Arizona. Tom, thanks for being here. We're going to switch gears and talk about the Colorado River and trying to get a pact together between the upper basin states and the lower basin states, of which Arizona is one. And news that we were just hearing today in the newsroom is that the governor is going to go to a meeting. You're going to go to that meeting too. Tell me about when that meeting is and who you're going to be meeting with in Washington.
So the invitation was from the United States Secretary of the Interior. The Secretary essentially manages the Colorado River in shorthand vernacular. The invitation was for the governors of the 7 states that all have rights to use water out of that river, and the 7 governors' representatives who have been in the room negotiating for post-2026 operations, but in prior years as well.
Right.
Mexico also has a piece of the Colorado River, about 16.7% of that river. So Mexico, of course, is not invited into this meeting. It's just the state folks. For context, folks need to know that without mandatory reductions, which we're under right now, that river provides 40% of the water for the state of Arizona. That river provides water for 40 million people in the United States and Mexico, hundreds of thousands of acres of farmland. 90% or so of the lettuce, broccoli, spinach, green leafy veggies come from Yuma between November and April of every year. That is grown with Colorado River water. So it is a huge resource, even though it's a small river.
Well, and part of the problem, as I understand it, is way back in the 20s when they made the first pact, the 20s of the prior century, they either may have overestimated the amount of water in there, or it might have just been expedient at the time to make the numbers what they were. But my understanding is there's not near that kind of water in the Colorado system today and for the last 10 to 20 years.
That is absolutely correct. And one of the trends we're seeing is that we're still getting the same amount of precipitation or snow in the upper reaches of the river as we've gotten historically. but you only get 70% of that water or that snow turning into water in the river, 60%, whatever the number is. That's a new trend that we've seen over the last 20 or so years. The scientists tell us it's because the climate is warming. So you think about warmer climate, trees start growing sooner. They use a lot of water when you think about all the trees in the environment.
Yep.
The soil is drier, right? So the soil soaks up a lot of that water. That is kind of an alarming trend. So normally you think of a drought where for a few years it gets dry and then it goes back to how wet it used to be. We don't see that happening again. This is climate change. This is a more permanent reduction that we have to plan for moving forward.
And that's why we need an agreement.
The supply the river produces kind of crossed the demand line, if you could picture two lines, in about 2012. So we've been living on the storage in the two big reservoirs, Lake Powell and Lake Mead, since then, and we're mining that storage away.
A little bit of borrowed time there. So when you all go to Washington, what do you expect something to be accomplished? What do you expect out of that meeting?
I think it's an opportunity for the political leadership and for us who have represented them in the room to date. We may not walk out of there with a deal, but we may walk out of there with some new perspectives or some deal points that can then expand into a deal. And that's what I'm hoping happens.
Because right now it seems like after all the last couple of meetings, maybe you haven't even gotten some of those deal points, haven't even gotten started. Is that a correct way to
So
phrase
I think
it?
where we're at is the three states, California, Arizona, and Nevada, shorthand lower basin, put reductions on the table. For Arizona, it's a 27% reduction in our water use. The four upper basin states, Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, Wyoming, have essentially said, well, we'll make some best efforts to reduce our use. That's not acceptable. Our reductions are mandatory.
Right.
And we have mandatory reductions today.
Right.
So the other thing is there are reservoirs above Lake Powell. And there's water sitting in those reservoirs. And I want to see that water be put to use. I don't want to drain those reservoirs into the mud.
Right.
But there's usable water that can help lessen the cuts or the reductions that Arizona has to take. And then lastly, we have to negotiate on an annual basis how much water moves from Lake Powell to Lake Mead. The more water that moves from Lake Powell to Lake Mead, the less likelihood we have to reduce our use, and the vice versa. So the river isn't producing as much as it used to. We think under the law, those four upper basin states owe us a certain amount of water. There's a disagreement there.
Yeah.
We're trying to have a deal that we don't have to fight over the law.
Yeah. Because you got a deal, it's easy to do. It's a lot easier than going to court or something like that, which could be an ultimate outcome of all this. But I'm sure you understand the upper basins. Southern Utah's growing like crazy right now, and they probably are thinking, we want some water. And there are parts of Colorado where, I've heard tell they're kind of watching out for the water because they think they might need more over the divide on the Front Range. And so you understand what they're doing. You're just saying, hey, let's all play this game together.
So what I like to say is those who benefit from the largesse of the river should contribute to its protection. And I don't think the upper basin states have contributed much of anything to its protection and expect us, and that is the bugaboo. So under the law, we're capped at a certain number, and we've been at that number for a long time, and now we're a couple of million acre feet. 1 acre foot serves 3 or 4 homes, but we're well under our cap. They haven't grown into their cap yet. So that is a major point of discussion when we get in that room, right? But we think their cap was put in place in 1922 with the other side of the coin being they agreed to send us a certain amount of water every year. And so you can grow into your maximum under your cap, but you still have to get us our water.
Yeah, yeah.
And that, of course, you can imagine is a big point of disagreement as well when we talk and when we discuss the legal parameters that attach to the operation of that river.
And it's amazing how, as you say, 40% of, well, the CAP, what it serves, not only Metro Phoenix, but Tucson, the industry that's served, the agriculture, the businesses, the households, it's unthinkable that, that could go away in some strange way.
So that is a huge part of what we're trying to protect. We're trying to protect the greater state of Arizona. Think of the economic impact and how that benefits all of Arizona, right?
Yeah.
Because how revenues work and things like that. But if there's no deal, the federal government a couple weeks ago put out a document that would show how they would operate the river. There's 5 different alternatives. They can still change that. They can pick from column A and column B and mix and match, but every one of those alternatives slams the lower basin and, more importantly, the state of Arizona, including some alternatives in which the Central Arizona project would go to 0.
Oh.
Now, in the defense of our friends at the federal level, they've also talked about a human health and safety volume of water. I don't know what that volume is, but they talk about that in the context of hospitals and emergency services, fire suppression, things like that. How much of that attends to homes and things like that, we don't know. So we don't ever want to find out, obviously. So we have a tough juggling act there as well. But it's been disconcerting to me that the federal government proposals all really hit us hard and really don't do much of anything to those 4 upper basin states.
So what happens if you all show up in Washington and they put those back on the table? That's going to be a tough...
So they're not off the table because the process is moving forward.
Okay.
There's a comment period. Anybody can comment on their report. If you look at the Department of Interior website, you can probably find the report because I don't know the address off the top of my head, but that process is available to anybody. Anywhere in the world can comment on that process, not just the United States. So probably by about mid to late July, the federal government has to make a decision. That's either going to be a collaborative 7-state plus Mexico agreement, or that's going to be imposition by the federal government based on that document and its successor documents that are part of a federal law process called the National Environmental Policy Act.
And one of the things I've learned just recently is that Arizona, because of CAP, one of the agreements to make CAP makes Arizona have junior rights to the Colorado River water. Is that why some of the potential ideas on how to figure this out are taking a lot away from Arizona, do you think?
Yes. So the shorthand for that is a junior priority from the 1968 Act authorizing CAP and having the feds pay for it and us having that loan paid back. There are lots of different interpretations of what that act might mean and how much it could cut us. Arizona has chosen over the years not to fight and not to go to court and litigate over that. It's why we've agreed over the years to do a little bit more. So on the table is a 27% cut for Arizona without others in our state, Yuma, others along the river who have a better right than CAP contributing. It's coming out of CAP. California's doing 10%. They have the higher priority over us. California could have said, we're not doing anything. That's one interpretation of the law that might win the day. Instead, they're like, we want to protect the river. We want to be good partners. We don't want to create a crisis in which one area can go dry because we know people are going to come knocking on our door, right? So there's a number of reasons why California's been a good partner. Nevada's been a good partner. Mexico's been a good partner. So we choose to collaborate there, but we have willing dance partners. I'm not so sure the dance partners in the Upper Basin yet have come to a place where I would describe them as willing. I mean, we're talking. And we've been talking for a while. And the talks can get, the debates can get intense. It's not like we're at each other's throats, right? I mean, we're professional. And as long as you're talking, there's always hope that you can come to an accommodation.
And as you say, probably we're going to have something by midsummer. Either the Interior Department says something, or you all have an agreement, or court.
So the new guidelines have to be in place to start operating the river on October 1 of this year,
Okay.
right? So yes, one of the alternatives, and maybe the alternative, is to go to court. So the legal framework that was put in place is between 7 states, which means the court that has jurisdiction is the United States Supreme Court, because it would be a dispute between states. If the federal government imposes, it could be in the same place. If the federal government imposes, it could be in federal court, district court, which you might go through the process and end up in the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of different places that you could end up in. The last major action was between Arizona and California in the 50s. The United States Supreme Court ruled in 1963. And then in 1968, this junior priority was imposed. So I say that because Arizona thought we had a great victory in 1963.
Yeah.
And in 1968, that victory was tempered to make a political deal to get the CAP built, right?
Yes.
So
Which we need.
there's a lot
Yeah.
of risk in court. There's also those potential unintended consequences where somewhere down the road you thought you won something in court and you might not have.
Yeah, that's for sure. Tom Bushotsky, I appreciate you coming down here. He is the Director of Water Resources. We'll talk to you after your trip to Washington, D.C. with all the governors. Hope that some success there, because we really need it. We need a Colorado River water deal for sure.
We prefer a deal.
Yes.
We do not want to go to court, but I believe that the governor's made it quite clear, and our partners in the legislature, both Republicans and Democrats, have made it quite clear. On November 11th, there was a letter sent by the leadership in both houses, both parties, with the governor to the secretary saying, hey, you better treat us well and fairly. And so I bring that up because it's really important for people to know.
Yeah,
This is a bipartisan thing in the state of Arizona.
really is. Good luck. He's the man that's going to get it done, and we appreciate you watching Sonoran Sky Live, a service of Arizona's family. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Good seeing you.
It's good seeing you again, yeah. Absolutely.